Hey there, it's Ryan Speltz, and welcome back to One Man's Journey. I've got Greg Pihs on with me today, and I'm super excited to introduce him to you. Greg is not just a speaker, he's a living testament to the incredible resilience and untapped strength that lies within each of us. His life, a harrowing yet inspiring journey from the shadows of severe adversity into the light of achievement, serves as the foundation for his compelling narratives. Greg's odyssey begins with overcoming horrific child abuse and the devastating loss of a sibling at a young age. Experiences that could have defined his life in sorrow, instead, they became the bedrock of his resilience. Joining the Marine Corps, Greg not only found discipline, but also a way to channel his pain into something greater, serving his country through 3 combat deployments at the dawn of war. These experiences, while testing him to his limits, also unveiled the extraordinary power of belief and the human spirit's capacity to triumph over trauma. As the founder of GP Mind Growth Academy, Greg extends his journey of transformation to others, guiding professionals and organizations to discover their unseen strengths. His credentials as a certified NLP and timeline therapy trainer, coupled with his expertise as a firewalker instructor, equip him with unique insights into the psychology of overcoming adversity. Author of the compelling memoir and manual for transformation, The Power in the Pain, Greg is on the verge of becoming a best-selling author. His book is more than a memoir, it's a beacon of hope and a manual that encapsulates the essence of his teachings on resilience, triumph, and the transformative power of beliefs. Greg's voice is one of unwavering strength and hope. Through his speaking engagements, he not only shares his remarkable story, but also empowers his audience to embark on their transformational journeys, proving that the power to overcome and succeed lies within each of us. Greg, I really appreciate you being on. We've been going back and forth, getting scheduled, and we're both, very busy people. So I appreciate you. We finally get it scheduled and get out here and get your story out there, because I think that you're going to provide a lot of insight into some really, really interesting things. So I appreciate you being here, Greg.
I'm excited. I'm excited to be on. And I appreciate what you're doing with this platform, because I remember earlier in my journey when I didn't believe what I'm doing today was even possible. And I know this platform stands as a beacon for people wherever they're at in their journey. I have this, to say, belief. It's through my journey and through sharing with other people. It was really unique to me to find out when someone suggested to me that we can heal our trauma using our imagination. And that seemed really, really unique to me. When I say unique, let me be a little more candid. It sounded very like snake oil to me. Like, you would imagine that I healed it, and so now we're going to pretend that it's healed. But someone broke it down to me like this, and it had a whole new realization. Our trauma, excluding if we're in a traumatic event right now in this instance in which we need a boundary in place, all of our trauma only exists in our memories. And our memories 100% exist in our unconscious mind. Now, when I say our unconscious mind, it starts sounding like, what is our unconscious mind? Well, we're conscious or aware of some things, and then there's other things that are going on right now because of us that we're not aware of. So consciously right now, how many times have you beat at your heart, made sure water filtered through your liver and kidneys, and took each breath? These are all happening. Factually, we know that to be true, but we're not exactly conscious of these things. So we have the conscious mind and we have the unconscious mind. And all of our trauma actually exists in our memories, with the exception of if someone's being traumatized in the moment. And then our memories exist 100% in our unconscious mind. Now, let me create a little awareness for that. Ryan, if I asked you to tell me about yesterday, if you pay attention and stay with me right now, you can tell me about yesterday, but not until or not before you bring the memory of yesterday into your conscious awareness. Prior to that, you can't tell me about it, but as soon as you bring it in, you can tell me about it. Where does that memory come from? And it comes from the domain of the unconscious. Like, we have access to it, but we don't consciously remember all of our memories. What's more is, so the trauma exists in the memory exists in the unconscious. And when we say the unconscious, in order to get into our unconscious, we have to tap into our imagination. Another example I used earlier are body functions. Well, if I asked you to consciously make your heart beat right now, you would have to imagine what that's like to do it. Your heart's just beating, but I don't think we've ever consciously given the command to our heart. And so if we were to visualize what that would be like, we would have to go into our imagination so that we could imagine what that would be like. Access into our unconscious mind is granted through our imagination. But here's what's more: the memories or the trauma that holds us down from our past, it exists in the unconscious, so it actually exists in our imagination. The way we remember it is not the exact way it happened. We have already distorted and tainted this memory. So we have put our imprint on the memory. It's already not factually exact the way it happened. I mean, we have the general idea of the memory. We definitely do. But we're missing details, and we've distorted and we've moved certain details. Every time we pull it up, whatever internal state we're in, when we pull it up, we alter it a little bit and then we restore it back in the unconscious. And I started to realize when this was presented to me that these memories are already tainted by me and having a negative effect. And it created the realization that, like, I'm already capable of altering these memories in some kind of way. And the way I hold these memories creates the effect for me. This is where I started to dive into how do we actually consciously begin to alter our memories. I heard a story one time, or a little parable, about two brothers that had a father that was an alcoholic. And one of the brothers grew up and became an alcoholic himself and was in fact homeless. And the other brother grew up to be a successful business person, had a wife, children. And when the brother that was homeless and an alcoholic, when he was asked why he became who he was, he said, because I didn't know any different, my father was an alcoholic. And when the brother that became the successful business person, family man, was asked how he became and why he became what he became, he said, because my father was an alcoholic and I never wanted to be like him. The memory stayed the same for both kids, but the meaning of the memory changed. The purpose of the memory, the source of fuel and power from the memory. One held the one brother down, and the same memory lifted the other brother up. And in my story, I share with people, when I was, I don't know, about 28 or so, 26 is when I began my personal development journey. And that journey's about 13 years in or so. Up until that time, I actually believed that I could not do what I'm doing today and what others are doing. People would try to share their message with me and convince me of what's possible and the potential that I had that I was wasting. And I remember vividly thinking in my head, they don't understand what I've been through. I can't do that. I don't know how to. I did not have the connections that people had. And very candidly, I love myself. Very candidly, I was a fairly ignorant human being at the age of 26. I ran away when I was 10. I did schooling in the detention center all the way through 17. I was a pretty ignorant human being, and I mean this by the definition and lack of knowledge and awareness. I really was. And I was aware that other people, we'll use the label to say smarter. Were they smarter than me? They had more clicking. I was aware, and I had this belief that, like, this is just like who I am. I thought I was like frozen as someone that was like lesser than and not capable. And that same childhood that weighed on top of me, that created beliefs that I absolutely, like, they don't see what's on top of me. If they knew what was on top of me, they would also know that I can't do it. That same childhood, that same weight is now a platform that I stand on top of to share with other people. I'm going to pause for a second. Ryan, I've like shared so much already. Do you have any thoughts, questions, or feedback on anything that's come through so far?
I'm taking notes. I think you got a good role there, and it's all good. We've had, people come on and tell their story in a matter of 3 minutes, and then we've had people, kind of go through that in 15. I think you've got some good talking points there. And really, like, every stop you've hit has kind of resonated something with me. The most impactful one up front was being able to see the opportunity to be who you've become when you were in the past, right? And I think that that's what a lot of One Man's Journey for me and the vision is about, is just creating the opportunity to see that it is possible. Like, because once you recognize that, you can't unrecognize it. Boom. Then you're actively denying yourself, right? Like you make that switch from understanding that, like, okay, this is just who I am, or this is what I do. And then you're like, but that guy did it and he has a similar background. And now you have to go in and go, okay, I'm doing this to myself. And that, that the other piece with the imagination and the distortion of the memory piece, that's been a big one for me. Similar journey with looking back, not in the child abuse piece, but, just other traumas that came through, and recognizing that, like, because I went through those, it can either be that piece, like you said, that's on your back or under your feet. And those two things were so impactful from what you said.
And you brought something I got excited about and dive into. When we talk about healing in the beginning, I said healing trauma with our imagination. I'm going to suggest that we can't without it. But okay, this is just my words, right? In order to access that old memory, we have to imagine that old memory. That old memory is not in existence. We cannot we can only get into it in imagination. And then the realization of experiencing this memory now. I am a trainer in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and timeline therapy. More importantly, I believe for everyone, these modalities spoke to me. There is like countless modalities out in the world for healing, and I believe they're all right. None of them are wrong. And the one for you is the one that you can digest or that you feel in vibrational frequency or alignment with. So I don't think people should use firewalking or should use timeline therapy or should use NLP, but I think you should go on a journey being curious and see what speaks to you. And when it speaks to you, there's a reason why. I don't know that reason, but allow yourself to go through that journey. Now, timeline therapy really spoke to me. And in a brief overview, and we're talking about using this imagination to heal, I want to share a little bit with people in a little bit more of a tangible concept. Because let's say we're like, yeah, I'm agreeing, Greg, but how does it go down? When we pull, like when the trauma happens, like no event is traumatic. And that was another one for me. Like when I received that information and integrated and downloaded, I was like, what? Like no event is traumatic. Like when I first heard that, and like most of you listening, you're probably like, well,
yeah, they're ready to jump down your
throat. yeah.
Like, come on, man.
The dilemma with this is, and by the way, I like, hopefully everyone feels my heart, because I am big on kindness and compassion. I am big on it. Like I'm to be candid, I'm not like I'm not a David Goggins fan. I'm just not that like vibe, but for those that it vibrates with, like that's a good vibe for you. So I'm not here to beat you up, but let's talk about it for a minute. No event is traumatic. In order for something to be an absolute truth, like if I said gravity's going to take this pen to the table, like every time it has to take it to the table, but furthermore, if I switch out the pen, it still has to go to the table because gravity's in play. It's not just tied to that pen. If this pen floated in the air, we can't call it gravity. We'd have to say it's something with the pen. Okay. So let's talk about this for a second. The event with the two boys, the parable or the metaphor that I shared and what they became, the event never changed. Now, I'm going to say that wasn't traumatic. That was just a little disturbing or something of the nature. Well, no event has any value other than what we place on it. I could say it like that instead of no event is traumatic. The event takes place and it's just an event. We then attach emotions to the event. And here's what's more. We attach negative emotions specifically to an event for the sole purpose of protecting ourselves. And we the unconscious mind knows to attach a negative emotion when we have not gathered a positive learning. So things happen, and at an unconscious level, we logically learn from them. So like we walk up to the door, we turn the handle, we push it, and we're like, oh shit, this one has to pull open. And then, so next time I know, I'll pull this door when I walk up to it. And because like this just happens in like a split second, we don't have to have negative emotions around this, because then the mind says we're good. We have protection in the future. We're going to pull the door. We logically figured that out. So protection's in place. When the event took place that was traumatic for us, whatever that may be, and I love to share this. This is completely made up for everyone, but let's say there was like a child that was, say, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. And let's say they had touched the stove, and everyone's free and clear of this, or children are free and clear, but let's say they had got a little burn from the stove. And that child is not at that phase in their life, at that level of development. They're not at a place where they're able to logically understand what just happened. Like everyone else touches the stove. The stove feeds us. The stove is good. Like people put stuff on the stove, but I touched the stove and the stove hurt me. So a negative emotion gets attached to this at an unconscious level. The child doesn't have to do anything. The unconscious mind says, hey, go ahead and slap fear on this, because if we make him afraid enough of this stove, he won't burn himself again on the stove. That's because the child was not capable of logically processing. Now, in this example, it has to do with the child was that young, but something could happen when we were 17, 35, 50, or 60 that we were not logically capable of processing because we had not reached a high enough logical level of thinking in life yet at that time. When this takes place, so Ryan, if me and you were in the kitchen and this child were to walk in the kitchen, they might like have a physiological response and go, and we might say, what's wrong? And they'd say, the stove is bad. And we logically understand, and see, this is how it goes when people were trying to convince me, no, Greg, you can, right? We logically understand. So we try to logically tell this kid, no, the stove isn't bad. You did that. And the kid's like, you're trying to get me burnt again, right? He's in that place. And then I might even, no, come here, I'll show you. I might even grab the kid gently. And then the kid might go, no. Fear is there at a great enough level to ensure that this child has self-preservation and is protected against this thing. So maybe anger is your thing. By the way, I was really good at anger for a while, like really, really good at it. Maybe anger is your thing, and maybe you blow up so others back down and then you can be safe. Wait, am I talking about myself? Oh, yes, I am. Maybe you share something like this on your journey. Anger was a big thing for me. If I got loud, if I was scary, I went to the gym. I used to do competitive bodybuilding. It was like this unconscious desire to keep people away from me and afraid of me. I had no desire to hurt them, but if they're afraid of me, they won't hurt me because I was hurt so much physically. The emotion gets put there, so the child gets fear given, and the fear will protect this child. And logically, I'm not saying that we cannot logically have a long enough conversation to convince this kid that the stove is good and to get to the stove. Maybe with a long enough conversation and enough persuasion and enough body language and tonality and rapport, maybe we could get this kid to logically understand. However, at a much quicker level, we can use, I like the term quantum, to each their own, but we can use the imagination and get this child to heal. Like I might start asking this child questions. Now, obviously, the questions that I'll be asking right now, these would be real questions I would ask that child. And this is where the training comes in the modality that I've decided to use to help other people because it's helped me. The child might say something like, the stove is bad. Like, hey, come here. And he says, no, the stove is bad. Well, with the training that I've done in NLP, there's a deletion of time. So I'm going to create awareness with it in a question. So I might say to the child, when is the stove bad? And then the child might say, well, the stove is always bad. And then I might say, has there never been a time when the stove wasn't bad? And then the child might think, and he might say, well, mommy cooks on the stove. And I might say, is it bad to eat the food that is cooked on the stove? And the child might say no. And this will go on in a process of questioning. I cannot logically tell the child. The child has to have new logical realizations. When the logical realizations take place, like here's another one. Is the whole stove bad? Yeah. So have you never touched a part of the stove and not gotten burnt? I've touched the front of the stove before. Okay, we've touched the front of the stove, and the stove has fed our family. But there's still something there because the stove's capable of burning us. How is the stove capable of burning us? And we're going to go through this series of questions until the child has the realization for themselves that there's areas on the stove that are hot. And there's identifiers or indicators of when those areas are even hot. And even if he couldn't see or didn't want to trust those identifiers or indicators, he could never touch a certain area and then would be capable of never being burned. When the child logically came to this realization on their own, by the way, how can they have realizations that's not happening in front of them? They have to use their imagination. They have to imagine what part of the stove is bad. What part of the stove hasn't burned them? When was the stove not bad? They have to go into their imagination. And while they're doing this at an unconscious level, this child would be completely and totally altering the entire memory. Once the child has a logical, and by the way, I'm using child in this example for everyone listening. It really doesn't matter. It could be a 40-year-old going through something. It would be irrelevant. But in this metaphor, once the child has the awareness, the logical realization of how to keep themselves safe, the unconscious mind's highest prime directive is self-preservation. You will get sick when you work. Like, how many people have be on the verge of something big and you're like, and then I got sick. And you're like, of all times, like, I'm going to suggest to you, your body was shutting you down for rest. I'm going to suggest your body said, I'm going to give you this so you can rest. It's time for rest. Like, self-preservation is the absolute highest thing. So with that, when this child has the logical realization of how to keep themselves safe, just like the unconscious mind actually inserted the negative emotion of fear to protect the child, the unconscious mind will release the negative emotion. There's no desire, like no part of self is against self. I mean, we can battle ourselves if it's really important for us to consciously battle ourselves. But at an unconscious level, self is for self. Self has always been for self. We are not against ourself. Our self or unconscious mind does not have a desire for us to walk around in dread, anger, fear, depression, anxiety. Our unconscious self at the rawest form, at the deepest level, like outside of our physical, for our energy, like we have a desire to be happy at our most core level. And our unconscious mind wants us to be happy. And in fact, it gives us all the things that we label as trauma and negatives and sabotage and things like that to protect our happiness against our, well, I'll say ignorance. It was my ignorance on my journey. So, to each their own. Ryan, let me let you dive back in. Do you have any thoughts, questions, feedback as we're going through this? Obviously, yeah, I love it. Go ahead.
I think I've done not in a professional manner or anything like that, but just I pride myself on helping people get to a point of the logic piece. So when you hit on the logical pathway there, that's huge for me in business, in life, and like that's a lot of what people have recognized on the show as well, as we go through this logical transformation of where we start and where we finish and how we got there. I'm going to push back a little bit from the end right there and say, when you were talking about how you were guiding that person down the pathway, and you were saying child, and you arguably, you said it could be a 40-year-old, it could be, anywhere in between there. I would say that as an adult with the ability to logic, when you get them into that process, there's a place where they start feeling uncomfortable because they notice that the logic is attacking what they believe or what they've believed, and this entire belief system that their subconscious has built. So when you hit that point as this trainer, how do you back off to soften? Because there's no, like, at that point you can create this even more of a belief. And I do this with myself. Like, I ask myself the questions you're saying, right? Like, it's not with the stove, obviously, but like different things that are going on. Like, am I really tired, or do I just making an excuse? I don't want to go to the gym. Like, just even as simple as that, right? You're guiding yourself to that, and you got to create the new belief. But when you get to that point of where someone goes, you get to that, like, where the belief starts, and they fire back with, no, the stove burned me, so it's hot. Like, how do you get off of that and be able to find a way through it?
Yeah, no, great question. So there's a bit to unpack there. I would love to give you, like, if we had someone live we're working with, I would give an exact literal answer for that human, but we're slightly out of context. We're saying, hey, how do we do this in general? So I'm going to talk about it, a couple different things. For one, desire and pressure are the precursors for change. And either one can create change on its own. Both together create synergistic energy and really propel change. So what's important to note with how I work with people personally, I again, not a Goggins, right? For me, but for the people that need it. So I don't motivate people with pressure. That's by choice. I didn't say it's wrong. In fact, it creates synergistic energy, is even stronger when paired with. I don't encourage just leading someone with pressure, but if you pair it with desire as well. And I will help someone kindle desire. So I'll talk to them about what is going to be able to happen because they got over this. But it's really important to note, Ryan, that I actually don't help people that don't have desire. So if it's really important for someone, now I'm armed with a lot of linguistic tools. So like the questions I asked, like, we can even start getting into things like quantum linguistics. Like I'll ask a question right now, and to everyone listening, like your head's going to be like, what did he just say? And that's, well, it's on purpose. It's quantum linguistics. But I could ask someone a question like, let me ask you this. And I know this is a bit of an odd question, but if you'll just consider it for me, what won't happen if you don't let go of this fear? Well, their mind, like, what just happened? Like, quantify the question for a second. Like, your mind has to go way somewhere. Well, to go to that place they left where they were maintaining their problem. So before I even asked, and in NLP, it's called a pattern interrupt. So I took their mind to another place because inevitably, when we get really close to the edge, we flinch a little bit. And so I'm paying attention to that when the client flinches, and I'm loving them through it. I'm not like, hey, I'm just going to help them through it. So a lot of it has to do with the questions that I'm asking and how I'm asking the questions. But furthermore, if someone was to challenge me and say, yeah, but what about, at some point in time, it's okay for them to keep their problem. And that's crazy for most coaches, trainers, and things of that nature. But it's really important for me that someone has desire. And if they actually have desire, they're going to keep considering the questions I ask. And if they keep considering the questions I ask, we're not going to not heal it. The other thing to highlight, Ryan, is that I'm going to suggest that, much like I said, desire, the reason why I think it's so important is we're not ready to heal everything from our past. I am healing. I am not healed. I have everything that I've yet to touch. I wasn't ready for, and I needed all the healing that I did to get to here. So it's possible also, I would suggest that, let's say someone's like, they're like, I really have desire. Like, let's say I'm working with them, and like, let's say we go a couple sessions, because generally speaking, I'm getting rid of something in, like, if it takes a half hour. So let's say we're going a couple sessions and it's staying. What I would want to do with that person is go before that event. Something before that event needs to be healed so that this one can heal. These are just my thoughts or intakes. Let me send it back to you for what you're able to receive for that, and any other feedback and questions.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And as someone that's kind of developed this process on my own, obviously that gives me a little bit of a structure to kind of formulate around, right? If I'm doing this for myself, where you're looking in the mirror and going, do I really have this problem, or is it me making it up, or is it me coming from somewhere of the past or trauma or any of that? That helps a lot, being able to recognize, like, okay, let me ask myself a question that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, or something that's like on the other side, right? And one of the things that I took that question that you said of what won't happen, what in my brain, what that does is it takes me to, you mentioned the pattern interrupt, but it takes me to the same side as you, right? Like, because oftentimes when we're challenging someone or challenging a belief that they have, we end up on the other side. Like, even just asking someone why, like why did you do that? They go, and they instantly feel like they have to defend themselves and they have to defend their decision, and they dig their heels in even farther on it. And it was simply you trying to explore, like, well, I just want to know what the reasoning behind it is. It's not a negative. And so flipping that question to, like, what won't happen puts you on the other side of that question. And then now we're on the same side looking at the issue going, okay, how do we make this happen? So I love that, like, that ability there, just by asking a simple question, can flip that. And I would encourage people to, in their day-to-day, like, if you're trying to challenge someone, I think that's a good way to do it. is by how can you get them on the same side to walk you to the solution instead of trying to fight your way through it. That's really a huge way of doing that. So I would assume that somebody did this for you and it kind of sparked something in you.
Yeah, of course.
So the potential piece, and you've come back to it a couple of times, and I wrote it down twice actually, where you talked about just someone telling you have potential. And I think this is a common thing for young kids, like, oh, you got all the potential in the world, or you got all the time in the world, or you can do whatever you want to do. And then they watch that person not do that. And so we have unlimited examples of people telling us that we can do whatever we need to do, whatever we want to do with our lives, and then not doing it. And so what was that person that walked you through? And do you remember a moment in time when you kind of made that flip of like, okay, I can actually live into this? Like, what was the spark?
Yeah, man, there's a couple. I'm going to share a few aha moments here. In 2011, when I began my journey, trigger warning, however we'll say, when I began, I was really a dark night of the soul moment, like on the verge of leaving physical form. And I shared, like, I would say, and I love myself. I think it's fair to say, like, I was a fairly ignorant human being. Again, not just beating myself up. I hadn't really read books. I was not even I had a high school diploma, but they just kind of pass you along. Like, they put you in a room when you're in a detention center and like just keep moving you along. Like, no one's grading nothing, no one's doing nothing. And so it all first started for me, like the everything started with a book on forgiveness. And I'm sorry, because I know everyone always asks, like, who's the author? What's the name of the book? And I have no clue. It was in 2011. One of the first books I ever read, again, like dark night of the soul moment. And another trigger warning, but for all of the guests listening, to give a little bit more backstory to it. My biological mother died of cancer when I was 3. My father was an over-the-road truck driver. My stepmother was graphically abusive. And when I was 7 years old, I witnessed her kill my 5-year-old brother, picked him up by his ankles, dropped him on his head on the concrete, severed his brainstem. And furthermore, said he fell off the pool deck and threatened my life to say any different. So this went on. I ran away when I was 10. Somewhere as in my teens, I tried to say that this is what happened, and I was completely made to be as if I was crazy. So I kept this with myself for a long time, and somewhere around when I was like 30, released it. Okay, 2011, I find this book on forgiveness. This is the onset of my journey. By far, like, period. Like, I'm at the end of my road, like definitely at the end. And I read this book, and what I pulled from this book, what allowed me to begin my journey. Now, this book did not like transform my whole life or nothing like that, but it kept me alive. What I extracted from this book was the realization that, like, I genuinely believed that my stepmother could not be forgiven. And furthermore, I'm sharing candidly for everyone, I would daydream about torturing this woman. So, and I share this from a place of like, oh, here's where we were, so we can kind of see where we went. And so I go into this book for forgiveness. And I actually, at the time in my life, like, I was really mad at God, like extremely upset with God. And I challenged God, like, if there's something in this book, like, give it to me by the end of this book. Hate to spoil the ending, but I'm still here, obviously. What I took away from this book and what I'm going to share with you guys, like, obviously what I'm about to say is not the whole journey, but it was enough to get me going. For me, like, look, to everyone their own. When I got done this book, I quantified that forgiveness was a decision. Okay, I don't know if that's what this guy wanted me to even understand in this book, right? We take what we want, what we need from a book when we read it. I quantified that forgiveness was a decision. In my own mind, I thought to myself, if forgiveness is a decision is a discipline. And I thought to myself, like, I was great. That was one thing I was great at, was like discipline, like exceptional, like too far on that side, if anything. So I thought, if forgiveness is a discipline, then done. I'm doing it. Like, no one out disciplines me. And so I was like, fine, I make the decision. I'll forgive my stepmother. Now, as most of us know, it's a little bit more work than that. So like, literally, like, probably, I don't know, I'm guessing, but probably like literally maybe if minutes went by, like, no way hours went by, like maybe minutes. And I was like, no, fuck that. Like, she cannot be forgiven. and like it would just boil inside of me, like weird thoughts. Okay. And then I'm like, no, I would just re-up on this commitment. Like just minutes later, maybe it'd take me 10 minutes to calm down. And I'm like, no, you said you were going to do it. Like, you have to do it. You know, you can't not be capable. I'd already done, at this point in time in my life, I had done competitive bodybuilding and things of that nature, Marine Corps, 3 combat deployments. So I'm like, I don't give a fuck, like, to myself. And I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but I'm just being really candid right now. My mind, I'm like, I literally tell myself, like, I don't care how hard this is. I don't care what it means. I don't care what it is. You're going to do it. And it was just deciding. And I remember thinking to myself, because the first couple of days, like, I just kept like reneging on this decision, and I related it to bodybuilding in my mind. And what I thought to myself was like, I'm disciplined for bodybuilding, but every single meal, like the next meal is a new decision. And the next meal is a new decision. And like it never ends. Like ever. Like, I have to decide to get up and go run this morning. I have to decide to go work out. I have to decide to meal prep, like over and over and over. And sometimes you're in a rhythm, and sometimes you're like, golly, I got to do my meal prep again. But it was going down. And so I mapped this across in my mind. And I said, well, you just recommit the decision. No matter how many times you want to bail from this decision, you just recommit to this decision. The beginning of my journey started like that. And without just that, I wouldn't be here. Without just that. Obviously not complete forgiveness. And I'll power through a little bit for the next, through about 2000, from 2011 to about 2018. I was pretty hardcore, like a hermit crab. Like, I went to job, work, did a really exceptional job, got promotions. And then I'd come home, I'd read books, and I'd go to the gym. And when I was at work, I was using my experiences with people as experiments. Like, I'm being super mega raw. Like, I did not know. I literally went out and intentionally did not know. And I took what I was reading from these books. Like, one of my favorite is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I suggest, like, one of the best manuscripts on how to treat other human beings, but you have to read it, make your own decision for those who haven't yet. I just started experimenting with these things in life. And I'm getting promotions, I'm feeling happier, and like, life is getting better, like 1 inch at a time. Let me be candid here. Like, each year, like every single year since 2011, my life has gotten better every single year consecutively. But we're getting there like 1 inch at a time. Eventually, I crossed 2018, 19, I crossed paths with NLP, and it spoke to me heavily. And that's where I really, really went on some esoteric and deep dive journeys and retreats and experiences. And I don't know how much time we have today, but yeah, of course, I could share some of the mentors along the way that have shared things at different retreats and trainings that really just like opened my mind to a whole nother level of like what exists in the world.
Yeah, I do want to keep some mystery around you, so people go search you out and look for you and hear your story on some other areas there too, with the mentors and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty common thing, and I think it's really difficult for people to conceptualize that. Like, it doesn't necessarily take this massive, huge, what's the word, like the explosion of the earth moment for you to be changed. It can be something as simple as hearing one quote and going, yeah, that really makes sense to me. And like you said, it's like that 2 minutes at a time, and then 10 minutes at a time. And like, you have to consciously make those decisions. And I think sometimes we also get caught up in the fact of, like, where you were saying that it requires the decision over and over again. If we look too far in the future, ultimately we're going to start bailing on things because we go, I can't, like, I know that I'm going to have to keep making this decision, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
And it can create havoc in our life. So, for me, and I say this often, is today is day 0, and tomorrow's going to be day 0 again. And the cool thing with that for me, like, I'm consistent, but I'm consistent because I challenge my views daily, and I challenge things that, like, I'm not going to cement my feet in really anything. There's very, very few things that I've cemented my feet into.
I love that.
And being able to continue to move and become that, like, just slightly changed person, the inch at a time. And some days you're going to go an inch backwards, and then the next day you're going to jump up 6, right? And it's just, it's really, like, it's refreshing to see that story play out, and how you describe it, obviously with your ability to put words together. I think that you have the ability to connect with a lot of people, and it shows throughout your content and through, this episode and a whole lot of things. So, that's me re-encouraging people to seek you or search you out and find you and interact with you. What's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, great question. I think right now the best way for people to connect. So The Power and the Pain is my first book. We're probably about a week or so out from releasing, and depending on when you guys, when the viewers are watching this, if you go to thepowerinthepain.com, it's thepowerinthepain.com. You can be notified of when the book's releases, or depending on when you're seeing this, you might be able to just buy a copy right there. Really a great way to get involved, learn a little bit more about inside this book. I share a little bit more in depth on my story, but more importantly, I shared the other day, like, we're not admired for our struggle, we're admired for our strength, what we're able to do because of our struggle. And I really share in there a lot of those aha moments on how my strength was created and where I gathered strength from when I didn't even have strength. So thepowerinthepain.com is a great place, Ryan.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes everywhere and make sure that's being spread out there too. So I'm super excited for you, man. That's really exciting that we're shooting this like a week before. I think it's obviously great timing, and maybe you set me up, but I'm okay with that too. I'm happy about it.
No.
So the timing comes in there. So I appreciate you being on with us, Greg, and I'm looking forward to collaborate with you in the future and keep supporting each other on social media and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I appreciate what you're doing, sharing this platform and taking your time to help other people. Everyone that's getting to watch this, or everyone that's following, obviously they're able to keep growing, and it takes, people like us that are going to share the light for those that haven't seen it yet. So I really appreciate what you're doing and getting to be on the platform.